right, it is my great pleasure to announce Professor Suzanne Lunsford and Professor William Slattery, who will be presenting on online e-portfolios in higher education, a multidisciplinary approach. Professor Slattery earned his Bachelor of Science in Geoscience and Geology from Jersey City State College in 1986, a Master of Arts in Teaching from St. Peter's College, Jersey City, and a Doctor of Philosophy degree from Earth and Environmental Science Department at the City University of New York. His dissertation focused on stratigraphic architecture and sequence stratigraphy, I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right, in the upper Devonian rocks of Pennsylvania and New York. He's taught K-12 school, and he is now in geological sciences and teacher education at Wright State University, pursuing a track in both science education and geological research. Dr. Lunsford is familiar to many of us who have attended this conference before. She is a professor at Wright State University, an electrochemist, and an internationally established chemical editor. She has been working with colleagues from international universities on how to integrate interdisciplinary science labs to meet the needs of the 21st century. I will mention that she also has over $1 million in external funding for her international and local educational inquiry-based science research programs at Wright State University. It is my pleasure to introduce both of you. And thank you so much.
If they can relate research, education for real-life problem solving with this kind of hard science, anyone can do it. To solve problems in the real world through the students, making research through the student. If they can do it on that hard science, anyone can do it. So please listen to what they did, so you can probably do something like that in your area to relate, students with the research. Thank you.
Do you want to make it big, or is it good enough on the screen? I think it looks good. Okay, I just want to thank Dr. William Slattery coming here for his first time to this conference. And I want to say that also with the grant funding that Dr. Gill was saying, my collaborator, Dr. Slattery, and I have been working on this grant funding. So he's also done very successful grant funding and had many, many National Science Foundation grants as well on other projects. So I commend him for his hard work. So today what we're going to talk about as colleagues working together in a project is 2 professional development programs for K through 12 teachers funded by the Ohio Board of Regents, as I said, and we work together through this funding agency, through the Ohio Board of Regents, to provide K through 12 teachers with professional development experiences to meet the state standards. Our teachers in high-need school areas are lacking content knowledge. So how do we integrate that, and how do we do that with online as well? So we have 3 phases involved. So today our talk's called Online E-Portfolios, because we're going to show you how we do those e-portfolios online, discuss that. And higher education, a multidisciplinary approach, how we integrate science, technology, engineering, and math into the curriculum as we're doing these workshops. The 2 programs that we're specifically talking about that were funded by the Ohio Board of Regents was the Partners in Integrated Earth System Science, and the other one's called STONE, which is Science Teaching for Ohio's New Economy. In phase 1, we're focusing on, for these K through 12 teachers in the high need, to take a summer field trip followed by a lab experience at Wright State University. And phase 2 is where we have our 4-week internet course, and that's during the academic year of the fall when the teachers are actually in their own classroom teaching. They're actually creating e-portfolios with their students and assessing their students with inquiry-based learning from their summer experiences. They build that into the fall, into their classroom. So they're actually utilizing what they've done in the summer to build upon this inquiry-based learning concept. By phase 3, they're doing 4 bi-monthly conferences, and this is where they collaborate among each other in the different school districts in the state of Ohio. And it's such a widespread, we have, say, over 200 miles and maybe 60 miles, and maybe even sometimes over 300 miles, just depending in the state of Ohio how they travel in to do the workshops. And the online part saves us a lot of money, so phase 2 and phase 3 we can do it online, but phase 1 they're required to be on the field trips and on campus. Here's some examples of the field trip, like the field experiences that you'll see. This is at Beaufort, North Carolina. So in the PIES program, we actually take them to Beaufort, North Carolina at Duke University Marine Lab. And I believe your first picture is a slimy oyster. And you can see this student's caught a very exotic fish. So they're looking at the diversity in the ocean and comparing the physical and the chemical changes, which is a very big state standard for middle childhood. This teacher is a middle childhood teacher. We also have high school teachers, so we up the curriculum with water quality and environmental science, how to relate that into the classroom. Here we've dredged the ocean, and we've got a variety of samples at the bottom of the ocean, as you can see. And the very bottom one, you have your echinoderm, your spiny echinoderm. And then up here at the very far left, where she's kind of squatting in her shorts, she's actually looking at Lee Creek Mine. That's a dredged area where at the fossil museum, we have a place called the Aurora Fossil Museum. And this student is actually digging for fossils to compare the ancient ocean versus the modern ocean. And that's one of the questions during Project PIES that we emphasize. Can you compare the modern ocean to the ancient ocean, and what does that tell you? So these field experiences are very vital. We also do water quality on the field trips as well to talk about how water quality is important in our everyday life and meeting the state standards in middle school and high school as well. So kinetics and chemistry is the rate of a chemical reaction. So my main thing is hitting the chemistry curriculum, and Dr. Slattery's and we're hitting the earth science curriculum. And so kinetics is the rate of reaction, and this area, as Dr. Bill would probably like to tell you more about is the quarry.
Yes, this is a quarry that's in Ohio that we bring teachers that are attending the Stone program to. And let me just tell you just very briefly, my rather eclectic kind of background with being a K-12 teacher and also having a PhD in geoscience is what led me to Wright State University, because prior to about 25 years ago, Ohio, like many states, had no room in the science curriculum for earth science. So that teachers and students really didn't know a lot about the earth sciences. But Ohio was starting the process of creating state standards to be able to incorporate earth science into the K-12 curriculum, which led to a great deal of teachers coming in for professional development, but also affected pre-service teachers, because we began to help pre-service teachers who had no earth science in their own background to better understand where that was. And I really have to say that I thoroughly enjoyed Dr. Gill's presentation when he talked about going from peak to peak, because these students, in many cases that were pre-service teachers, for example, did have a background in the physical sciences or did have a background in the earth sciences, and that was okay. They were, to use Dr. Gill's terms, that they were on that peak. So my problem was, how do I get those people to go from that particular peak to be able to better understand earth science, which is really a no-brainer, because earth science is a composite. In order to really understand the history of the earth, or for that matter, the history of the solar system or the history of the universe, you have to understand physics. You have to understand rates of reactions. In order to basically understand minerals and the composition of the earth, you have to understand chemistry. So we take them from what they know to what they don't know in ways that help them to connect with their own particular subject area in teaching the earth sciences. Now, that was 25 years ago. In the fullness of time, the wisdom of the Ohio legislature, and I have to say the other 49 states of the United States, has found it in their wisdom to remove earth science from the curriculum again. That's created several problems that I'll get into when we talk about this, but one of them is this, is that the students in Ohio and the students everywhere make their career choices. They think about what field they're going to be going into when they're in high school. But there's no earth science in the high school. So they have removed effectively the knowledge of careers that are available to students that are in the throes of making those choices for themselves. That's created problems for industry in the state of Ohio, especially geoscience industries like this. So I'm going to leave it at that, come back to that later. But one of the things we try to do is when we bring teachers in, we try to, in these programs, connect them in a kind of informatics way with infrastructure and with systems that will enable them to be able to better teach their students who don't have any geoscience as well. So what we do is try to make it fun, we try to make it interesting, we try to show that the people that are in the geoscience industry are people just like them and just like their students, and also they do some neat things. So one of them she's going to show you in a second.
So in the kinetics, if you think about kinetics as the rate of reactions, the study of concentration, this is a quarry in Columbus, Ohio. Calcium carbonate is a very vital aspect, even if you think about our roads, our highways in the state of Ohio, that's how we build them. We also emphasize on Project PIES, the phosphate mining also can be utilized for calcium phosphate for roads and building. But in the state of Ohio, we have calcium carbonate. So what we did with our group as teachers, the best teachers that really studied till the end of the week of the workshop, we would let them blow up a quarry. And so they got to push the button and see a quarry blow up. And so this is an example of how the aggregate industry, if you look in the video, is going to do something exciting. So that is an example of chemistry and its best way to create the aggregate industry of what product they need, showing you the mining process. And so when Dr. Bill was talking about how they took the geology out of the curriculum, one of the things we do is with environmental science, I try to do is emphasize the environmental science part and try to build the aggregate into the high school classrooms so they see there's real-world jobs in Project Stone that their students could be taking on and learning about. Even though that curriculum might be gone, we still try to emphasize the chemistry because that's a state standard to build back in there, and also build upon how the aggregate industry builds with the chemistry and how chemistry is vital. So one more time if you want to see the explosion. You can see our students were excited, wow. So that's a real true video of what we did with them, and we thought that was pretty neat. The next project that we're going to talk about is, yesterday we were talking about math quite specifically a lot in our seminar yesterday, and we were talking about how math is a vital part and how, you know, you try to get students to learn math and how does that equation relate. And Dr. Blair had a really good point. She said to me, well, you know, I took calculus 1, 2, and 3 and I really never did use it. And I agree with her. That is really a shame. So what we try to do, I think Dr. Bill is a great professor because he thinks about real-world aspects in his geology classroom, but how to integrate the other parts of the curriculum such as math. And I do too, because like in high school, you learn the quadratic equation. And you know, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. That sounds like nothing you're really interested in. But that quadratic equation is vital in chemistry because you have to figure out the concentration of the solution. So the mine I just showed you that we blew up, what's the concentration of that explosive to make that mine blow up exactly the way you want it to? So the quadratic equation is really useful. So on this project that Dr. Bill's going to go deeply within, talk to you about the particle in a box, or the project in a box, you could call it. is utilizing math. So Dr. Bill, I'll let you talk more about the box and how you made the students solve the problem.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lunsford. And I have to say that when I said that the state of Ohio has removed earth science from the curriculum, I want to be sure that you understand that that removal has been at the high school level. So earth science in some of its aspects are taught in 3rd grade, and that's when they do like rocks, and, you know, how are rocks the same and different from each other. They do a unit in the 7th or the 8th grade that essentially talks about volcanoes and things of that nature. So the very rudimentary parts of earth science are available, you know, at the elementary and middle school levels, but none is available at the high school level. And that's the same throughout the United States. There is no earth science taught in any of the states, except for North Carolina, and North Carolina doesn't have a physical geology requirement, but they do have one for environmental science. That's the latest I know. I may be wrong, but I think that as of several months ago, that was exactly the case. So what we want to do is we want to bring teachers in from across the spectrum. We want to bring in high school teachers because we want them on board. And essentially the program that we have combines regulatory agencies like the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, the water and soil and dust and all of the things that are involved with quarrying operations. We have cooperation from industry with industry members, and essentially what industry members do in Project Stone and to a similar degree in Project Pies, which we'll talk about in a while, is that the industries will essentially partner with a local school teacher. So for example, if a school teacher from City X wants to be a part of Project Stone, that teacher will partner with a geoscience industry member from that area, and they will partner with them. What will they partner to do? The answer to that is they'll partner by coming into career days to talk about the jobs that are available in the geosciences in that particular area. They'll be available to come into the classroom to serve as experts if they want to, if the teacher wants them to talk about things. And they also serve as venues for field trips that are local in nature, that don't require a tremendous amount of money, because Ohio, like many other states, is in the process of reducing the amount of money that public schools get. So reducing the amount of money that public schools get mean that there's less money for students to go on the outside and to see some of the different things that students in the past had been able to go and do and see. So with that as a background, what we try to do is we try to work with students in that first week. We have a 2-week summer program that Dr. Lunsford was talking about. In that 2-week summer program, essentially in the first week, we take them out and we take them to various venues to show them what all is involved with the industry. We take them out to quarries. We take them out to sand pits. Ohio has a great deal of glacial deposits. And just as a very brief idea and history of that, Ohio 10,000 years ago was covered with a veneer of rock and sand that came from the Great Lakes area, was pushed at the front of glaciers down to about a few miles north of Cincinnati, and then started to retreat back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, but the overall motion was that the ice melted, and the sand deposits, the gravel deposits that were at the bottom of glaciers, because glaciers are like dirty ice cubes, those glaciers melted away, but the sand and gravel remained. And so these become very valuable resources for the state of Ohio. They use them as road metal, that is, that they use that for making roads and highways, repairs of roads and highways. A lot of it is for concrete, many, many different uses for it. But the fact is that even though 86 of the 88 counties in the state of Ohio have some form of industry in the way of a sand pit, a quarry, some cement plant, whatever it is that's there, they have trouble getting people to work because people don't know the jobs exist. And essentially, I started out, I don't know whether it's in this or not, but the amount of people working now today in the industry, in the state of Ohio, 76% of those individuals are over 50 years old. And so there's a tremendous need for young blood to be in those industries. On the other hand, Ohio has a lot of unemployment. Ohio's a very diverse state. We have, some of you may think of Ohio as being, Cleveland and kind of like Pittsburgh with a lot of steel workers and heavy industry. But also there's a part of Ohio that's called Appalachian Ohio, where many of the people come from the rural South and have come from the rural South to Ohio in the past to be part of those industries. A lot of those industries have gone away. There's not much more in the way of auto. There's not much more in the way of making refrigerators and heavy home appliances as there used to be. So there's a lot of unemployment. There's a lot of difficulty in getting workers because they don't know about them. So how do we engage students and how do we engage teachers in order to help those students better understand the kinds of things that they could do as careers? And one of them is called, as you see up here, the box. Now, let me tell you what the box is. The box is a copy paper box. So it's about that big and about that wide. And what we do with that is we have a teacher that comes in, and she's basically a specialist in this. She works with us as part of the mentor-teacher program, and she creates uneven surfaces that are made of newspaper and covered with
Plaster of Paris.
plaster of Paris, impregnated like cloth, right?
Yes.
So this cloth, this wet cloth, is put in water, put over the shapes that are on the bottom of the box, and then they solidify. Then we cover the shapes that are there. The
Which is considered the landforms.
Exactly. And we cover that with sand. So here's what we do. If you look up here on the right, you'll see those red straws. Well, what they're to signify are drill holes. And so what we try to do is we try to take teachers from a concrete, no pun intended, but from a concrete way of looking at a situation to a more abstract view. And that concrete to more abstract view is facilitated by having them visualize in a structured way what is underneath the surface of the sand. The sand is level, underneath is this undulating surface, and they have 5 straws.
So you can see the first one is just the plaster of Paris, which is the white texture. That's the topography. And then you can go to the second one. That's actually where we have the sand with the holes. We only allow 5 drill holes. We tell it costs $1 million a drill, like it does in the real world. If you drill in the wrong place, you don't get an extra straw. You've already made that decision. That's part of your grade.
So what they need to do is, first of all, organize themselves. They work in groups of about 3. This is during this Project Stone's second week. And they come up with a plan. Where are they going to put these straws? And most of them usually put one in each corner and one in the middle. But there have been other variations on the theme. They decide what to do, and then they make a plan as to how they're going to do it, how they're going to make a cross-section of the box. That is, what does the subsurface look like? And then how much sand is in that box. Now, because this is not a real-life situation, we can take the sand out of that box. And then they have to calculate a percent error. So it becomes this kind of thing where one group is kind of competing with other groups, but it's in a collegial kind of atmosphere. People share because we have these like Post-it notes, except they're really big and wide, and the groups will put their plans together and they'll paste them up on the walls, and then they'll do a walkthrough and they'll talk about it, and we'll encourage them. If Group A is looking for a solution to something or some problem that they have with their particular procedure, maybe group C can help them out with that. So, you know, that's kind of a, you know, we say it's an analogy for a scientific conference.
And once they do the percentage of error, they actually discuss it, as Dr. Bill's saying, how can they correct and do better calculations? What was their percentage of error and why?
Exactly. And what happens is that they do it. They go ahead and do it. And you know, I do have to say, because sometimes it just is amazing to me. Because some of the teachers that are in there, for example, last summer, we had a group of teachers that had, as all those teachers for all those years that we've done this program had to do, was to do a cross-section of the box. What does the hard surface on the bottom of that box look like? And so they calculated, they use geometric figures, they do it so, you know, all these different ways. And then last summer we had a group that cut to the quick, a group that essentially made a jump from peak to peak without going through a valley. You know what they did? Imagine this is the box. What they did, they realized that when they went down to where that cloth and the paper mache was, that the sound was different. And so what they did is by sounding, they made their cross-section. And the darn thing was almost perfect. Because and then they said, well, we just use sonic geology, which in fact is a lot of what really is done in real life. But they had cut to the quick. And so that innovation, if you will, was then used by every other group. And they went and they did it their way, and then they did it the other way. And when they did the percent error, they calculated again using the bottom of the box that they had by the sonic method, and they found that their percent error was much, much
That's
less.
right.
So I guess this is an example of the way that kind of what works gets transmitted through other groups in a very efficient and fast way. So teachers bring that back. They get encouraged to be able to do something like this with their students. Do they do exactly this with their students? No, because the students are not on the same kind of level of abstractness as the teachers. But what they do is their teachers are very, very creative and creating their own ways of working with this. And so, for example, just one example, what a teacher did is said, I know how I'll use this in my classroom. It was a 7th grade classroom. She said, one of the things that in the 7th grade we have to do in our school district is we have to show and tell students about what are called landforms. Landforms are anticlines and synclines. Synclines are the valleys and anticlines are the hills. We have to tell them about faults, where part of the rock drops down and part of the rock stays up. We have to do these landforms. And I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to break them up into groups and I'm going to assign them to these landforms. And they're going to, in secret, put these landforms together using this paper mache. And then they're going to cover it up. And then the challenge will be for the other groups to determine what those landforms are. And I said, how would that be different from what you do now? She says, well, what we do now, Bill, is this. We tell our students that they're going to have a quiz. And they're going to have a quiz tomorrow, and it's going to be on landforms, and it's going to be on the landforms that they have in their books. And I come in, and you know what? I'm never very surprised that they don't do as well as they could. They just don't study the landforms because they don't think it's interesting. But now she said, I think I'm going to do that as a challenge and see whether that works or not. And so the answer to that would have gone out into the ether and been away, and none of the other people that took part in this particular program would ever have had an inkling as to whether that worked the way that the teacher wanted it to work or whether it didn't. But because of our e-portfolios, we're able to take those teachers who are working together as groups during this 2-week period in the summer and bring them together in a virtual environment with people they already know and with situations that they're already aware of, so that we can be more efficient in terms of having the students from all over the state of Ohio come back to Wright State. We can make it efficient for their time, that they don't have to take the time to do that, and we can do it in a way that will facilitate the program in which their particular program is working. So,
Yes.
that's the reason that we have the box. And into the classroom, if you want. Go ahead.
Yeah, so into the classroom, just as I was saying, like Beaufort, North Carolina and Project PIES, they're doing water quality, and they're looking at how to test water quality using a variety of ways. Electrodes versus the old technique, which is titrations, versus a Lamont water kit, which is calibrated to a certain extent. How do you really determine what is the best way to test water quality? So into the classroom shows you, this is an example of a teacher in a high rural area. It was where like 76% of the students are high need students, and they never really have an example of, this is an example of concentration. And what they're doing is, there was 2 activities she did, but the one was looking at, if you put a drop of food coloring in, and then you keep diluting to 1/10, 1/10, 1/10, 1/10. So you start with what's called serial dilution. You put 1 drop of food coloring to 9 milliliters of water. In the second test tube, you put another drop from the first test tube into the second test tube that's empty, and then 9 milliliters of water. That's a 1/10 dilution. What the student should see is a lightness in color, a change in color as the process goes along. And that's called serial dilution. And then they can measure the pH and see how the pH changes. And this was a math teacher integrating the chemistry, which is the water quality aspect. If you have a drop of, even her example was a drop of, say, urine or sewage in your water, so the kids said yuck, and they were interested to know which one was the most concentrated with the urine or the sewage in the water. So the red drop represented that, and she's talked about serial dilution. Also within there, she did pH, and then she did acid-base, some acid-base solutions such as vinegar, household items, talking about acids and bases, and how to compare pH with the logarithm, because that's a part of math. pH equals the minus log of the hydronium ion, if you remember, the log base 10, and how do you do that in math? So a lot of students have a lot of trouble seeing if they have an exponent, such as 10 to the minus 2 molarity, and you take the log of that, that actually the pH is 2 to see a trend in doing the math. So in a middle childhood setting, we think this is the best time to really introduce the mathematical and chemistry. So this is an example of e-portfolio week 1 on phase 2.
Alrighty, well, you know what we do is this: the teachers finish up their 2 weeks at Wright State, they go back to their classrooms, and they face an entirely new set of kids. So what we do is we have a 4-week online interaction. It's not a course per se, but it's an interaction among colleagues. And this interaction among colleagues starts out with essentially saying, hey, here's my situation. Here's the number of students I have. Here's what here's the challenges I faced this year. Here are the changes, good and bad, that may have occurred since, I've been able to be with you over the summertime. So it lays out for all the participants the kind of the playing field that all of the teachers find themselves in during the new academic year. So that's week 1. We start this in October.
No, actually September 15th.
Oh, September 15th.
Yep.
Okay. That what we do is, for this particular iteration, it was September 15th, and the school year starts in Ohio usually to the middle or 3rd week of August.
Yeah.
So in this case, the teachers have had a few weeks to acclimatize themselves to the population that they're serving.
We changed a semester, so we get confused about the dates sometimes.
So then what we do is this. We say, just like that teacher that was going to work with their students and use landforms, the second week says, and I know this is busy, so let me translate this to you. Basically what it says is, that if you're going to assess your students, if you're going to find out what your students know at the end of this activity that you're going to be putting together, and it's going to be something that students do that is hands-on, and essentially that hands-on becomes the transition period between concrete and more abstract reasoning about the topic. How will you do that? How will you assess that? Will you assess that through multiple choice tests? I don't think so. So teachers have a discussion about how they will assess students if they're assessing not a bit of knowledge, but a way of working. Then week 3, they put together their lesson plan. And a lot of this, I think we're going to go through from now on, is the session that we're going to be having.
Yes.
When we talk about the templates and how we organize all of this in ways that make it more useful, not only for the teachers who are participating in the program, but also because the Ohio aggregate industry and the mine industry kind of organization that we work with posts all of the lesson plans on their website. So we want to do it in an organized way. We'll be talking more about that organization part during our session later this morning. And then finally, here's the reflection. How'd you do? What happened? And because they're comfortable with each other, it's more likely that they're going to be open and honest about that, about how they did, what mistake did they make. And obviously, you know, it's not going to go perfectly the first time around. That there are going to be things that they want to change. That's the nature of life. That's the nature of teaching. So in this aspect, they get themselves ready for the phase 3, which is meeting with each other on an informal basis. We'll usually pick a teacher. You know, would you be kind enough to tell your colleagues about what you did or how you've extended this program to other areas that you're teaching? And so they'll say, sure, I'll do that. You know, and so we'll have one of these bi-monthly conferences, and we'll say today, the 7th grade teacher from Cincinnati Public Schools is going to do a presentation about how she's organized this into her self-contained classroom. That is, that she teaches all the subjects, and she's done something about literature, and here's how they've done it. And so they'll talk about that as these sessions evolve. And it's remarkable because we have other professional development programs at Wright State University that are longer term in nature. And there's so many people that we get into those longer term programs as a result of their having participated in these.
So just to wrap up, because we are running out of time, is the benefits of our professional development program. So we do ask the teachers before the workshop and after the workshop how they feel about science and math and their concepts, and so they become more comfortable. Math and science is what the post-assessment mainly showed us, and that they learned how to develop inquiry-based activities and new equipment uses, how to use the equipment in their classroom, and pre- and post-test gains were very high, according to our Heike. And then this is a lesson plan template briefly, just the basic things, the grade level, the resource type. We asked to hit the NG, Next Generation Science Standards, the activity pre-assessment, pre- and post-assessment, all these items to be put on the OAIMA website for the teachers, a lesson plan to share with other teachers that might want to utilize that inquiry-based lesson plan. And so lastly, the changes in practice. We found that, again, their confidence was gained. They learned about open-ended investigations, new technology, more of a heterogeneous abilities, how to work with different people, different school districts, and also different types of techniques and equipment in the lab. And the e-portfolios were very useful because they can utilize that in their classroom. So it wasn't just a workshop you throw in and you don't use it. You actually take it back and use it throughout the rest of your career is our goal. And this is just an example how we collaborate with real-world industries such as Bowser Morner. This is an X-ray fluorescence. What you do is you hit the sample with an X-ray. You basically, it gives off an excitation. It gives off X-rays from the certain sample. Calcium carbonate is what these samples are composed of. And so it's just comparing different types of ancient versus modern clams, the arched-eared, ancient and modern. And you can see the percentage of calcium carbonate in those samples from the modern ocean versus the ancient ocean on the field trips at Beaufort, North Carolina. That's an arc shell, just in case you want to know what it looks like, because that's interesting. Some people don't know. And so we'd like to thank you for your patience with us. We thank everyone for listening and our colleagues who have sponsored us and allowed us to continue these programs.
And again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time today.